This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to this special edition of the Hub on CGTN. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. The year 2022 was a challenging year for all of us. The world continued to grapple with the COVID-19 pandemic. The Russia-Ukraine crisis disrupted the world as we know it. And in addition, we have Palestine-Israel conflict, the situation in Afghanistan, and China-US relations. They all made the already uncertain international situation more complicated and more complex. What will we remember the year 2022 for? And what to expect in the new year, the year 2023? We'll try to answer all these questions in this special edition of Looking Ahead 2023. My first guest is Jeffrey Sachs from Vienna. He's a professor and director of the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University. Professor Sachs, we know that you're also on the Lancet COVID-19 Commission, which investigates and analyzes the pandemic. Do you think it's safe to say that the worst is behind us as so many countries reopen its borders and readjust to their COVID policies, China included recently, although people are, suffering from a fresh wave of infections, but many people remain hopeful that the worst is behind. How would you compare China's, relaxation and its new pandemic rules, easing its pandemic rules and restrictions these days?
I think we need to understand that there were three phases of this pandemic. First, there was the initial outbreak, and that was a very dangerous and virulent form of this virus. And in 2020, there were no vaccines available yet, of course. And so the quite tough measures that were taken by China, the zero COVID policy, and that was a kind of measure taken basically throughout the Asia Pacific region, also Australia, New Zealand, and so forth. That made sense. It saved lives. We didn't do that in the United States in that way, and we had hundreds of thousands of deaths because of that, whereas China really kept the death rate low. Then the second phase came with the new variants like Delta, which were very dangerous, in fact, but also the spread of vaccination. This should have been done much more cooperatively than it was. We should have shared technologies. We should have not made technologies a matter of vaccine nationalism or of commercial narrow interests for a lot of reasons. We didn't do that. Nonetheless, there was a lot of vaccination, but also a lot of inequality and doubts raised and many other problems. But still, the second phase was the vaccination phase. And the strength for China is that it reached very high vaccination rates, around 90%. Of course, because of the low incidence of the disease, some of the really vulnerable people, the older people, didn't take a vaccine. They said, we're not in danger. And they need to be vaccinated, and that's key for now. The third phase of this was Omicron. The Omicron variant is less lethal, certainly, but really infective. And it was nearly impossible to suppress it with the zero COVID policy, simply because it's so infectious, much more infectious than the original variants. Yeah. And so for that reason, China was in the process of lock down this city, lock down this city, lock down this city. It could not be sustained. If it had been the original variant, it actually would have worked, most likely, as it did for the first 2 years. But with Omicron, it couldn't. So we're really in a phase right now where we have to rely on vaccination and treatment. We have to rely on especially vulnerable older people or people with other kinds of comorbidities or prior conditions taking special care. We have to watch really hard for new variants because this is absolutely a danger. We should finally be cooperating and coordinating on best practices and vaccine technologies. It's just terrible that even though our governments put in the vast sums for these vaccines, they were privatized so that we're not sharing some of the deep know-how that every part of the world should have. And I hope that we could move beyond this false commercial model, because it's not really commercial. The US government paid for so much of the development of the Moderna vaccine, for example, but then said, okay, you get it, it's your profits. That doesn't make sense. So we really need to be very alert in 2023. Yes, maybe the worst is over. Let's hope. High vaccination rates, a lower lethality, but there could be new variants and new dangers. And we didn't cooperate properly in 2020, 2021, and 2022. Let's put it on our resolution list that we actually cooperate on COVID in 2023 so that we do everything we can to ensure that the worst is over.
I want to shift gears a little bit, Professor Sachs, and talk about the impact of the end of COVID, or the beginning of the end of COVID, for the world economy. That is really on the mind of many, because after all, so many people around the world need jobs, they need better capacity to take care of their families. As China eases its COVID policy and soon hopefully opens up its border with no quarantine requirement, hopefully, what do you think that will mean for the global economy? Because according to many estimates, the global economy is in a very bad shape going into 2023.
We need China to open and for Chinese businesses to be traveling outside. I need to get back to China, frankly. It's been 3 years, and I need to get back so soon. I can see friends and brainstorm on these issues together. We really need to reconnect the world economy. We really need to stop the nonsense of decoupling, which is a wrong-headed idea. Our interconnections are good and important for us. We can't solve problems on our own. We need actually to see a scale up of programs like the Belt and Road Initiative, because China is out there saying we will help our neighbors and even some distant neighbors to invest in infrastructure, digital, energy, transport, so that we can be interconnected together. This is a fantastic thing. By the way, it creates a lot of jobs. China exports a lot of the infrastructure, the machinery, the technology, and others do as well. So those kinds of investment-led programs are extremely important. And I think China has a major role to play. You know, there was a lot of attack from the outside on the Belt and Road Initiative, almost all of it wrong, most of it for geopolitical narrative reasons, because it's an important and positive initiative. Within China, there were doubts or loss of confidence in this approach. Well, are we just pouring money into something that doesn't make sense for us? But actually, it's an important initiative, and I really hope that it goes forward strongly. It should be, of course, a green, sustainable Belt and Road Initiative, but China has a huge role to play in helping to build the 21st century infrastructure in ASEAN, in Africa, in Latin America, and so forth. And that will be very good for China's economy and very good for the world economy.
Yeah, talking about the war in Ukraine, you remained optimistic. Actually, in early December, you wrote, and I quote, "There is now a new glimmer of hope for a quick negotiated end to the war in Ukraine." What makes you see a new glimmer of hope?
Well, lots of people of influence called for a negotiated end to the war. Our top military man, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, said this is the time to negotiate. President Emmanuel Macron of France said we can find a way out through negotiation, respecting everybody's security interests. China has gotten it right, in my view, saying repeatedly, end the war, respect the security interests of all parties. in my view, it's not hard to see what a solution would be. So much of this war was provoked by the US pushing its military alliance, NATO, into Ukraine and deeper into Russia's neighborhood in the Black Sea. That was dangerous and provocative. Russia viewed it as a threat to its national security, I think plausibly so. All the United States has to do is pick up the phone and say, stop the war. We don't expand NATO. You end the military conflict. We find a way to guarantee Ukraine's security. This war could end quickly.
Professor Sachs, I want to ask you about China-US relations. The year 2022 has seen quite a bit of ups and downs. Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan, a very controversial visit to this Chinese province. And then US has launched multiple rounds of sanctions against China and Chinese individuals, including a ban on chip export. Then, of course, we had this long-awaited meeting between President Xi and President Biden in Bali, Indonesia. How would you summarize the year 2022 when it comes to US-China interactions? And perhaps more importantly, your prediction for China-US relations going forward?
There is a battle in the US between hardliners, so-called neocons or neoconservatives, and those who want cooperative relations with China, which is a lot of us and a lot of the business community as well. That battle continues. From the neocon point of view, the idea for the US is to contain China, stop or slow China's progress, actually, hinder China's access to technology, and ensure that the United States remains number one. That's their vision. To my mind, it is mind-boggling, harmful, dangerous, provocative, can really get us into conflict, and unimaginable. Who wants to contain China? What a terrible idea. What we want is economic progress that goes around for the whole world, actually, and everybody can get ahead in a safe and sustainable manner. So the idea that the world is a zero-sum struggle, which is the neoconservative idea, is absolutely wrong. The world is a place where we're all in it together. We face some very big crises and common challenges together, and where economic progress can be spread. It's not one against the other. So this is the battle going on in US foreign policy. I believe that the right approach absolutely is for the two sides to meet each other, to establish again a structured strategic dialogue, because there are a lot of complicated issues. These are two giant economies with a huge sway in the world. They should be talking to each other carefully, in detail, not throwing charges in the social media and sound bites and provocative trips like Pelosi took over the strenuous objections of China. No, this should be a relationship of mutual respect, of prudence, and of a lot of dialogue, and where necessary, of some hard negotiating as well. But that's what's going to get us to be able to prosper together and to solve problems together. So at the end of 2022, that battle within US foreign policy continues. The meeting between the two presidents, in my view, was extremely important. The follow-up of Blinken's visit can be quite useful. What I'm hoping comes out of it is a structured, ongoing, intensive dialogue. And of course, I very much like and promote so-called track two dialogues as well for all the rest of us, that we're making as much contact, discussion, and analysis together as is possible.
Yeah, I mean, foreign policy starts at home, and there are two major political events happening respectively in China and the United States as well. One is US midterm elections, where the Democrats lost control of the House. How much weaker does that leave President Joe Biden and his Democratic Party? And what do you think it would mean for America's foreign policy making, especially its China policy?
It leaves Biden weaker in that it will be very difficult, very unlikely for Biden to pass any significant legislation going forward. Even legislation actually supported pretty broadly and by both parties, because the Republican majority in the House of Representatives will not want to give even political victories, even if they support the substance, to Biden, because now in the U.S. mindset, we're already in the presidential elections for 2024. So there's always a look, what does this mean for the next election? So in this sense, I think Biden is actually considerably weakened. There won't be major legislative packages, most likely. There will be investigations on many issues in the House of Representatives because of the Republican majority. They'll aim to tie up the administration in many ways. But with respect to Chinese foreign policy vis-a-vis China, I'm not sure that this has any decisive play, because I would say it's the dominant position of both parties right now to take a hard line towards China. It's not wise. It's not the right foreign policy. It's not serious in my view, but it's what is continued in 2023. It may make a push at the same time, though, towards more negotiating, more support for negotiations, I should say, in the Ukraine war context, because a lot of the Republican side is far less enthusiastic about continuing to pour tens of billions of dollars of finance and armaments into Ukraine, and actually believe, as I do, that we need a negotiated outcome.
Yeah, the other important political event is the party congress here in China. As a China watcher, I really want to ask you about your take on the significance of the Communist Party of China's 20th Party Congress, where the Chinese leadership apparently emerged even more consolidated and more powerful. Where do you think that leadership will take China, especially when it comes to China's foreign relations with the West, with the US? Because it is a question repeatedly asked by Western elites.
I think China's deep interest, and I think it was expressed very clearly by President Xi and very clearly by the 20th Party Congress, is that China wants a stable, multilateral system under the UN Charter. There's a lot of rhetoric about a rule-based system. The U.S. calls for a rule-based system, but never defines what that means. If there is such a rule-based system, it should be the UN rules. And that would be very good. And it makes sense also for China as one of the permanent 5 countries and one of the leaders of the UN system, that we actually double down on the multilateral system, make the UN work properly, give it its centrality on problem solving like climate change or biodiversity, where there is no alternative really. And so I'm heartened by China's both its, I think, the right perception of the right policy, and also by the statements that were very clearly made and are typically made by China, which is that China supports a multilateral system under the UN Charter. And with China helping to lead on that, and I very much hope in cooperation with other major countries, and not viewing this as a necessary conflict, even if the United States does provoke or prod, or some in the US, the neocons call for that, that China just keeps a very steady position. We need multilateralism. We need the UN system. We need cooperation within our region. We need cooperation between regions, such as with the European Union or the African Union. I think that this actually will work. I don't see another way, but I think that China's position is correct on this, and in China's clear interest.
At a time when bad news has been dominating the headlines, sports has shown us the power to change the world, at least for a moment. The year 2022 is definitely the year of sports. At the start, we had the Beijing Winter Olympics. And as the grand finale, we had the World Cup in Qatar and this iconic image of Lionel Messi kissing the trophy after Argentina defeated France in what I personally think is the most exciting and suspenseful World Cup final in 30 years. There's also a powerful message from the Atlas Lion, Morocco's outstanding performance, shooting up all the way to the semifinals, the farthest any African nation has reached in the World Cup history. What is this awesome power of sports? Let's hear it from my two guests. In Milan, we have Gianni Merlo, president of EIPS, International Sports Press Association. He's also a journalist with Italy's La Gazzetta dello Sport. In Beijing, China, we have Yan Qiang, sports commentator and founder of Score Sports. John, let me ask you about the emergence of what I would say the rest of the world, because the world football scene has been dominated, as you know well, by European and South American teams. And this time around, we have Morocco, our brother's team from the Arab world. We have Japan and South Korea beating expectations. What do you think is behind the rise of Asian power in soccer, football?
First of all, I cannot say that Asia is on the rise. A few nations from Asia, especially Japan, is on the rise. That's for all to witness, to see. But I'm not sure about the other Asian countries, counting Australia as a AFC nation in the World Cup, and South Korea and Saudi Arabia, including the hosting nation, Qatar. I'm not so certain that the whole Asia level has reached, the level of the Moroccans, of the African countries. But Japan is an outstanding example. They started their own system, and they declared their remote and middle distance targets, years ago. So they have all their plan, and they adhere to their roots of popularized sports across the nation, which they stick to their principles for the past 20, 30 years. And they don't simply just copy the models of other nations, of any those so-called advanced nations. Of course, they absorb anything helpful, from the other nations, but they stick to their own system.
But talking about Chinese football, I want to ask John first, if you don't mind waiting, Gianni, about whether or not you think there is a model for Chinese football, for Chinese men's football to follow. Are there, for example, a Japanese model? Is Japan's model good for China? Or do you think, a Moroccan model that is using naturalized citizens with Moroccan roots, is that successful? I mean, China tried it and apparently failed. What would be, a good model that is unique to China, but that also is effective for China?
My answer to that is a blatant no. There is no model for China to copy. There is no shortcuts to success, especially talking about football. Football is the most special sport which consumes huge amounts of social resources, in all kinds of social industries. We just cannot take the shortcut and learn from Brazil, the German, or Spanish, or Japan. We have to create our own model, which is to popularize the sport, to grow the grassroots, to be patient for 10 to 20 years for the next generation to grow up. Otherwise, we will always fail.
Gianni, what do you think?
But I think that he is a little bit pessimist. The only problem is that you have to study a situation, a completely new situation. It depends if in China the kids are going to play football in the field, in the streets, and everywhere, and in the school especially. Because the big problem of China is that your nation is so big, with so big population, that it's very difficult to have information about where the talent are. I think that this is what I discussed when I came in China in the first years, because, I was in China for my first experience in China. It was in 1978. Guys, you were not born. Yeah, okay. And it was a different China completely, I can tell you, completely. And when you were going in the park, you were seeing the people to make gymnastics in the morning, but a special kind. I've never seen young kids playing football as it happened here in Europe. No, so it depends about how you can organize the play of the kids in the way that they can begin to play football, because after the young generation looking at television, they learn a lot more than before, because they have a lot of possibility to try to copy. And remember that the kids are very quick in understanding what to do if they see the right example. So it's only a problem of how you organize the sport in your school, and after how is organized the sport in the village and everywhere. Most important thing is to give to all the kids the possibility to play before. And after, you have to grow also a number of coaches and everything. But the most important thing is to be free of playing.
I mean, Yanchang, grassroots enthusiasm and youth training are so important. China apparently are lacking in those fields. A lot of catching up to do with our Western counterparts, with our Latin American counterparts. Where do you think Chinese men's football should start when it comes to doing the catch up?
Start from two places, schools and families. I mean, sports education has been just lagging behind in our old school education system for years now. And Gianni made a great point. If the kids cannot play football in school, so where could they play? China has always put so much emphasis on academic success.
I know.
School has been you are just one outstanding example of that. Good student.
I wish I could have had the chance to play more football. I mean, I guess you wish too, right?
Yeah, that's the point. If
I wasn't allowed, really. I mean, schools,
it is still not allowed.
So much pressure on academic performance.
And you just cannot sneak out and play football for 10 minutes. The teachers will get you back and pay your attention to the books and papers. And if we cannot change the social culture, there will be no chance for football to really set up roots, among kids. We have already wasted several generations of kids, and we're still at the starting point.
Yeah, Gianni, let's talk about the soft power aspect of the World Cup. I mean, the nations carry soft powers with them, and the World Cup is certainly a big stage for them to present their soft power. Many call the World Cup a game of soft power, a platform to shape global perceptions and attitudes about their culture, their people. What do you think the World Cup trophy will mean to the people, to society of Argentina, now that they're the newly crowned once again champion of FIFA World Cup?
But I think that from what we have seen, that million of people went to welcome the player when they come back. It is a feeling of people can feel that it's possible to reach new goals. It's possible to go out from the difficult life of every day and to reach a point. I think that the soft power is that you give new hope, the possibility that the future can be better. And I don't know after which kind of impact can have on the industries, on the business, because the situation around the world in this moment is very difficult everywhere. In some way, I think that this million of people in the street, it means that in some way this World Cup has given a new hope, because people were enjoying it. And even in Naples here, where Maradona was a king,
Yeah.
in Napoli, there was a lot of people in the street for the winning of Argentina. Can you imagine? Everywhere there was demonstration also there. So it means that people wants to believe that the future can be better, and that we can really, all the people of sport can speak together without problem. That sport is making bridge between generation and even between countries.
Yeah, for sure. But let's not forget, John, Beijing, our home country, home city, has hosted 2022 Winter Olympics, which is also setting a very important milestone, making Beijing one of the very few cities who have hosted both the Winter and Summer Olympics. How do you see China's legacy and China's gains by hosting the Beijing Winter Olympics earlier this year?
I think it's quite different from what I experienced in 2008, the first Summer Olympics in Beijing. This time around, it's more light-hearted. It's even more entertaining, which might sound funny at that time, but it was true. You know, people came to enjoy the sports more comparing to 14 years ago. Of course, China is still not a typical winter Olympic or winter sports nation, but this is a great chance for the whole public to really understand some of the different disciplines of winter sports and come and really fall in love with all these jumping, high ski jumping, you know, all different winter sports, which is a great showcase, you know, for the whole public here.
Yeah, the next Winter Olympics will be held in Italy. Gianni, how do you think China and Italy can deepen their cooperation in winter sports in particular, but also sports in general? Where can the two countries, two societies, two cultures learn from one another?
First of all, I was in Beijing both in 2008 and also this winter. Now I have lived in the bubble. You know,
Wow.
it was a very special situation to live in a bubble.
Yeah, I know.
Not to have the possibility in the night to go to live the life night in Beijing. That is wonderful. Unfortunately, we're always in this bubble, but we have to live in a proper way. And I think that the investment that they have done, especially in the place in which the competition were outside Beijing, was well done because of the freeway, the situation. You are preparing the future. Regarding the possibility of the cooperation with Italy and China is very important, because I think that the experience you did, even for the transportation to the different venue, is very important, because in Italy, you know, will be very spread, because in China was a little bit spread around, but in Italy will be completely spread. So I think that we need to understand what was the experience of the Chinese organizer to adjust the situation of, especially of the transportation and in other field, to make successful competition and also successful participation of the media in the next game. That will be not so easy. It's a new situation, so it is a kind of test, and I hope that the cooperation between the people that has the experience in Beijing and the people in Italy will be very important.
It's so true. It's so true. We've seen the uniting power of sport, and we'll see it again, hopefully in 2023. We have looked back at the key geopolitical issues of the year 2022, and we have also seen the great power of sports. And now, in the last part of this special program, let's talk about something new. It could be a new venture, a new idea, or a new opportunity, even a new lifestyle. During the new, I have Enoch Wang, Senior Advisor of Online Education and International Cooperation from Tsinghua University, here with us in Beijing, China. And also we have in Los Angeles, United States, Malik Naibi, social media influencer and founder of Duke 65. Enoch, Malik, welcome to the Hub on CGTN and welcome to this year-ender program.
Thank you so much, Mongwen.
You know, I consider both of you my friend. What's more important is the fact that you're both what we call slash youth, young people with multiple skills, talent, and occupations, if you will. Malik, let me start with you. You're apparently a social media content creator and influencer with millions of followers on multiple platforms. You're an entrepreneur right now these days in the West Coast. What's your understanding of this slash youth? How are you enjoying this label, this title?
Yeah, well, I mean, according to my dad, it's called unemployed, but I think according to my dad, I think the slash youth is another name is unemployed. So, but to be honest, I found it I think it's a growing trend globally, not only in China, and I see a lot of people here in Los Angeles. Like they always have a day job, and at the same time, they're also a funder of something, a designer of something, and they're pursuing their dreams in some other industry. So I think it's really young people trying to to break the tradition of work and into they have a job that pays the bill, but at the same time, a work that makes them happy and something that really entertain them while doing. So I think it's just it's a way of making your life much more interesting, and at the same time make a little extra money.
Enoch, you're a media personality, you're an emerging media personality, you're an advisor for your alma mater, Tsinghua University, you're helping your school reaching out, to a global potential prospective candidates. How are you liking the lifestyle of being what we call slash youth?
For me, when I went to universities, I asked myself, what do I want to do in the next 3 to 4 years? And I ended up studying mathematics and statistics. Of course, they're transferable skills, but it has very little to do with my career afterward. And then when I graduate, I asked myself the same question, what do I want to do with my career? And because of an very impactful volunteering trip I took to Pakistan and India, I ended up spending 3 wonderful years in Africa working on issues such as sustainable development. So I think that's one aspect. The other issues I want to touch upon is because of the advancement of technology, we're able to do more with less. We're able to maximize our efficiency. We're going to maximize our potential. But at the same time, we're able to do better with multitasking because we understand that knowledge and subject expertise isn't the most important anymore, because with the help of artificial intelligence and internet, we can have access to information anytime, anywhere. But instead, we focus more on the application of knowledge with application of different skill sets, etc. So at the end of the day, the reason why I enjoy the lifestyle of being a slash youth is that you are now able to do more with what you like. So who wouldn't want that?
As I understand correctly, you're both Chinese, either by origin or by identity. How do you look at the fact that China is, interacting with the rest of the world? We're at a very interesting age and time whereby there have been intensified geopolitical conflicts. China-US relations are not getting any better. How do you understand the mandate of being a Chinese youth at this point in time in bridging the gap of understanding between China and the rest of the world? Malik, let me start with you.
So I would say back in the days, the identity of being a Chinese when I was studying abroad, it wasn't as empathized because you can see a lot of Chinese students and Chinese tourists and businessmen were, doing cross-border stuff. And because of COVID, that has dropped dramatically. So when I was traveling around the world in the past 2 months, I went to the UK, Qatar, Israel, and the east and west coast of the US. There are just less significant number of Chinese youth representing the country and in different industry. So then I just felt a strong responsibility of this is the point of a very critical time that the country need people like us much more than before. And I feel like the world is trying to understand China better, not from a geopolitical perspective, but like the people, the civilians, the pedestrians. Like when I talked to a lot of shop owners in Scotland, right, like drinking whiskey with them, and they were like, oh, we used to have a lot of tourists, come by, and it's been a couple of years we've never seen them, and they were really interested.
You're not talking in that accent, though, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, I try to understand them, but 50% of what they said, it was enough to know what they're talking about, but. Yeah, so things like that, they're definitely interested to learn more about China. And I felt like the most day-to-day people, they do not have a very strong opinions towards China. But if you get your source information only from the news, you feel like, oh, there's a huge, a battle or a standoff between China and the West, China and the US. But from my personal experience, day-to-day people, I think they're still more curious and they know just very little information about China. And I think the world need people like us to bridge this gap.
So I want to talk about the year past. The year 2022 has been a very interesting and I would say tumultuous year with COVID that has been battled against here in China. With the reopening right now, and people are coping with the new realities. Geopolitically, there's a war going on in Eastern Europe, China-US relations. Enoch, how would you summarize the year past, the year 2022?
The year 2022 has been a year of rediscovery for me. I have rediscovered and reconnected to a friend of mine, and we end up finding out that we have a lot more shared interests, and I'm very, very grateful for that. Second, and decided to switch career to media and communication. Third, it's about rediscovering and rethinking about the future. So for me, when I have a lot of time on hand, I tend to think and reorganize my thoughts, summarize my learning, and think ahead. And this is very much true for the community that I belong to. Hong Kong have celebrated the 25th anniversary of the Special Administrative Region. And there's a lot of discussion and rethinking about the role of the Special Administrative Region to the country, as well as one country, two system, how it has been so successful in the last 25 years, and what can we expect in the upcoming 25 years and beyond.
And looking forward, what would you say that would be your dream New Year resolution for the coming year, Malik?
I just don't know what to expect in the coming year, but I would definitely hope that I would have much more freedom of choice in terms of traveling and doing things that I want, and I think that that's something that a lot of young people are hoping. And at the same time, just if like China, start reopening up, and then connect with the world faster, and that would also help my little business in LA, move faster. So a little selfish,
Your business is about what? Like helping Chinese companies overseas?
Yeah, so basically, we're trying to help more Chinese companies to move abroad and expanding their business into North American market through e-commerce and social media marketing, and that's a lot of Chinese company needs these days, because they have the capacity of production, they have quality products, and they are pretty much like the domestic market is, they've done quite well in domestic market, and they're still looking for growth. And where does that growth come from? Usually, there are European market, there's Southeastern market, but honestly, the really attractive market, or the most attractive market for Chinese businesses, is the US, because you have, similar size of market with consumer with a higher, expenditure and like ability to spend, and higher income brackets. So I think that will be a new trend for a lot of Chinese businesses for their future potential growth.
Okay, good luck, man. Enoch, what's on your personal to-do list or wish list for the year 2023?
For me personally, I'm very much interested in global development and sustainability, particularly for developing countries. Of course, earlier in the year, we have the 20th National Congress of the Communist Party of China, where it painted a roadmap for future development of the largest developing country in the world, China. And then later, towards the end of the year, we have a number of very important multilateral meetings, from the UN Climate Change Conference to the UN Biodiversity Conference, and of course, to the first ever China-Arab Summit. There were a lot of very interesting, very important framework that was agreed on, and I'm very interested in how it further developed with more details in 2023.
Alrighty, Malik and Enoch, best of luck for your future endeavors, and Happy New Year. With that, we're coming to the end of this special program, but an ending is always a new beginning too. Here on behalf of our whole team, I want to wish all of you and your loved ones a new, exciting journey in the year of the rabbit. Happy New Year. Have a great 2023. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing.